There are 8 foods sitting in British kitchens right now that most people eat every single day without a second thought. They are not exotic, they are not unusual, they are the things you reach for automatically, at breakfast, at lunch, as a snack, as the default when nothing else comes to mind. They are so embedded in daily routine that questioning them feels almost unreasonable. That is exactly the problem. Because the foods that do the most quiet damage are never the obvious ones. Nobody is eating engine oil for breakfast. The harm comes from the things that look ordinary. The things that carry health claims on the front. The things that have been sitting on British supermarket shelves for so long that their presence alone feels like endorsement. The foods that corporations have spent decades and billions of pounds making feel normal, feel safe, feel like just what people eat. Today on TruthCart UK, we are pulling 8 of those foods out of the ordinary and putting them under the light. Not to frighten you, not to make every meal feel like a risk assessment, but because you deserve to know what you are actually eating, and nobody else is going to tell you. The first food is white bread. Not artisan bread, not sourdough from a bakery. The standard white sliced loaf that fills the bread aisle in every supermarket in the country. The Hovis, the Kingsmill, the Warburton's white medium sliced that sits in millions of British homes as the default. White bread is made from wheat that has been stripped of its outer bran layer and its germ, the 2 components of the grain that carry the vast majority of its fibre, vitamins, minerals and beneficial compounds. What remains after this stripping process is the endosperm, almost pure starch, with almost nothing else of nutritional significance. That starch is then milled into white flour, mixed with water, yeast, salt, and an extensive list of additives, dough conditioners, emulsifiers, preservatives, ascorbic acid used as a processing aid, and baked into a product that has the shape and the cultural associations of bread, whilst delivering a nutritional profile that is closer to processed starch than to real food. The glycemic index of standard white bread sits at around 75, nearly identical to pure glucose. Your body converts a slice of white bread to blood sugar with almost the same speed and efficiency as eating straight sugar. The difference is that nobody thinks of white bread as a sugar food. It is bread. It is normal. It is what sandwiches are made of. That disconnect between perception and reality is precisely what makes it dangerous for people eating it multiple times a day without awareness. The vitamins added back during fortification, iron, calcium, B vitamins, are synthetic additions applied to compensate for what the milling process destroyed. Your body absorbs synthetic fortification differently and less efficiently than nutrients consumed through whole food. The impressive percentages on the label are measuring what was added in a factory, not what your body will actually receive. The second food is flavoured yoghurt, specifically the fruit-flavoured yoghurts that dominate the chilled dairy aisle and fill lunchboxes across the country. Plain yoghurt, milk and live cultures is a genuinely valuable food. The fermentation process creates beneficial bacteria, improves the digestibility of the dairy proteins, and produces a product with real nutritional substance. What the food industry has done with yogurt over the past 50 years is take that nutritional credibility and attach it to something that barely resembles the original. A standard supermarket fruit yogurt, the kind sold in multipacks for children's lunches, the kind bought in large pots as a healthy dessert, contains between 10 and 15 grams of sugar per 100 grams. A pot is typically 120 to 150 grams. You are looking at 12 to 22 grams of sugar per pot before you have added anything. The fruit content is typically a small percentage, often below 10%, with the remainder being sugar, glucose syrup, starch thickeners, and flavorings designed to intensify the fruit impression beyond what actual fruit would deliver. The live cultures present in some flavored yogurts are real. The probiotic benefit is genuine in principle, but beneficial bacteria and 12 grams of sugar coexist in the same pot, and sugar feeds harmful gut bacteria as readily as it feeds beneficial ones. The net gut health effect of a daily sugary yogurt is not what the packaging implies. Experts who understand this choose plain. They add their own fruit. They control the sugar. The flavored yogurt industry is built on the assumption that most people will not make that connection. The third food is breakfast cereal. specifically the category that markets itself at adults as a healthy, moderate choice. Not Frosties, not Cocoa Pops, the ones in the red boxes and the blue boxes, the ones with words like bran and whole grain and high fiber on the front. Special K, Bran Flakes, Fruit and Fiber, all bran. These cereals have been given a pass in the public consciousness because they do not look like the obviously sugary children's cereals beside them. The branding is restrained, the imagery is adult, the health claims are prominent. And so millions of British adults pour a bowl every morning, genuinely believing they are starting the day well. The reality is more complicated. Bran flakes contain around 22 grams of sugar per 100 grams, comparable to many biscuits. Fruit and Fiber is worse, with the dried fruit component pushing sugar content higher, while the health positioning remains entirely intact. Special K, as we have covered before on this channel, is deliberately low in protein and fat, which means it digests rapidly, spikes blood sugar, and leaves the person who ate it hungry within 2 hours regardless of the calorie content. The fiber numbers look good on the label. The metabolic response tells a different story. The standard serving size printed on the box is 30 to 40 grams. Pick up a measuring scale and weigh 30 grams of cereal into a bowl. It is a visually inadequate quantity, barely a covering on the bottom of the bowl. Nobody eats this. Most people pour 60 to 90 grams without measuring. The sugar content on the label doubles or triples accordingly, but the label still shows the number for the portion size that nobody actually uses. The fourth food is margarine and low-fat spreads, the category that spent decades being actively promoted as healthier than butter and which many British households still choose out of a habit formed during that era. The anti-butter campaign of the 1970s, 1980s and 1990s was one of the most successful and most consequential pieces of nutritional misinformation in modern dietary history. Saturated fat was identified as the primary driver of cardiovascular disease. Butter was saturated fat, therefore butter was the enemy. Margarine, made from vegetable oils, lower in saturated fat, was the solution. GPs recommended it. Health bodies endorsed it. Food companies made enormous amounts of money from it. The science has since shifted substantially. The relationship between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease is considerably more complex than the simple model that drove the anti-butter campaign. Meanwhile, the trans fats created during the partial hydrogenation process used to solidify vegetable oils into spreadable margarine, the very process that created the product, have been identified as genuinely harmful to cardiovascular health in ways that original butterfats are not. The medicine that was prescribed turned out to be worse than the illness it was supposed to treat. Modern low-fat spreads have largely moved away from partial hydrogenation, but the ingredient lists remain lengthy, and the nutritional case for choosing them over real butter is no longer supported by the weight of evidence. Emulsifiers, stabilizers, added vitamins compensating for nutritional poverty, flavorings designed to approximate what the dairy fat they replaced would have delivered naturally. Experts who have watched the science evolve have quietly moved back to butter. Most supermarket shoppers are still following advice from 40 years ago. The fifth food is processed meat, specifically the sliced packaged ham, chicken slices, and sandwich meats that sit in the chiller cabinet and fill sandwiches, salads, and lunchboxes across Britain every single day. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same classification as tobacco and asbestos. Group 1 does not mean equally harmful to tobacco. It means the evidence that processed meat causes cancer is sufficient and consistent enough to establish the classification. The specific cancer most strongly linked is colorectal cancer, and the association holds across dozens of independent studies conducted across multiple countries. The mechanisms are understood. The preservatives used in processed meat, primarily sodium nitrite, react with proteins during digestion to form nitrosamines, a class of compound with established carcinogenic properties. The smoking, curing, and high-temperature processing of these meats also creates heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. further compounds with documented carcinogenic potential. None of this appears on the label. The label shows the protein content, the salt content, the calorie count. It does not say Group 1 carcinogen. It shows a picture of a pig on a farm and a brand name associated with British tradition. The WHO classification was major international news in 2015 and was then quietly absorbed back into the noise of daily food marketing. Most people buying sliced ham for their children's sandwiches this week are entirely unaware that it ever happened. The sixth food is instant noodles, the 2-minute packet noodles that are a staple across student kitchens, budget households, and late-night cupboards across the entire country. The noodles themselves, dehydrated wheat, are not the primary concern, though they are refined carbohydrate with minimal nutritional value. The concern is the flavor sachet, the small packet of seasoning powder that gets dissolved into the cooking water and makes instant noodles taste like anything other than plain wheat starch. A standard flavor sachet in a UK instant noodle product, Batchelor's Super Noodles, Nissin Pot Noodle, typically contributes between 1 and 2 grams of salt to a single serving. The NHS recommends no more than 6 grams of salt per day for adults. One portion of instant noodles can therefore account for up to 30% of the entire daily recommended limit in a single meal. For a product typically consumed as a snack rather than a primary meal, meaning the rest of the day's salt intake is still to come. This is a significant and almost entirely invisible sodium load. The flavor sachet also contains monosodium glutamate, multiple flavor enhancers, and in many products, additives that are specifically designed to stimulate continued eating. The palatability of instant noodles is not accidental. It is engineered. The combination of refined carbohydrate, high sodium and flavor enhancement compounds creates a product that is very easy to consume in excess and very difficult to feel full from. This is not a side effect of the formulation, it is the intended outcome. The seventh food is shop-bought smoothies and fruit juices, the chilled and ambient bottles and cartons that line the drinks aisle and present as the healthy alternative to fizzy drinks. Fruit juice has a health positioning so deeply embedded in British culture that it is almost impossible to dislodge. 5 a day, vitamin C natural, the orange on the packaging, the press in the name. These associations have been built over decades, and they are extraordinarily resistant to the nutritional evidence that has accumulated in the meantime. A 250 milliliter glass of fresh orange juice, one of the smaller servings, contains approximately 23 grams of sugar. The NHS recommends that fruit juice counts as a maximum of 1 of your 5 a day and should be limited to 150 milliliters, the amount that fits in a small juice glass, not the large glasses most people use. The reason is precisely the sugar content. When you juice a fruit, you remove the fiber that slows sugar absorption and consume the sugars from multiple pieces of fruit simultaneously. 3 oranges go into a glass of orange juice. Nobody would eat 3 oranges in one sitting and call it a health food. But they drink the juice without considering the equivalence. Shop-bought smoothies are worse in many cases because the blending process that creates them breaks down fruit cell structure further, and the sugar content of multiple fruit portions combined into one bottle is consumed in minutes. The innocent branding. The Tropicana simplicity, the own brand pressed juices, all delivering sugar loads that would provoke alarm if they appeared in a can of fizzy drink, but are absorbed without question because the source is fruit. The eighth food is low-fat labeled products, the entire category of foods where fat has been deliberately reduced or removed, and where that reduction is used as the primary health claim on the front of the packaging: low-fat yogurt, low-fat ready meals, low-fat crisps, low-fat salad dressings, reduced-fat cheese. The category is enormous, and it is built on a premise that the nutritional science of the past 30 years has systematically undermined. That dietary fat is the primary driver of weight gain, and that reducing fat in food therefore reduces harm. When fat is removed from a food product, something has to replace the flavor, texture, and mouthfeel that fat provides. In almost every case, that replacement is sugar or modified starch, or a combination of both. A standard low-fat fruit yogurt contains more sugar than the full-fat equivalent. A low-fat ready meal replaces the fat calories with carbohydrate calories and adds thickeners and flavorings to recreate the satisfaction the fat would have provided. A reduced-fat salad dressing replaces oil with glucose syrup and emulsifiers. The result is a category of products that consumers choose specifically for health reasons. The low-fat label is the entire reason for the purchase, which deliver an outcome that is nutritionally worse than the full-fat equivalent they replaced. Fat, consumed as part of a whole food diet, provides satiety, slows digestion, supports hormone production, and enables the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. Replacing it with sugar does none of these things and creates its own set of problems. Experts who understand this do not reach for the low-fat version. They reach for the full-fat, whole food and eat less of it, 8 foods. All of them ordinary, all of them embedded in daily British life so deeply that questioning them requires a deliberate act of attention. That attention is worth the effort. What you eat every day, not occasionally, not at special events, but every single ordinary day, is the most significant dietary variable in your long-term health. The dramatic choices matter far less than the habitual ones. And the habitual ones are exactly the choices that food corporations spend the most money making invisible. You have just made them visible, TruthCart UK. Because the label never tells the whole story.